Tensions between the United States and Canada have reached a critical point over the Alaska Highway. President Trump has threatened new tariffs on Canadian goods, provoking a strong reaction from Canadian leaders. At the heart of this dispute is the access route to Alaska, essential for the state's supply chain. The conflict began with rhetoric from Washington, with plans to impose significant tariffs on Canadian products. Canadian officials view the tariffs as an aggressive economic attack, violating long-standing trade partnerships. The response from Canada has been swift, signaling a serious confrontation. This escalating dispute threatens economic stability and strains one of the world's most peaceful borders. The focus on Alaska's access route has turned a remote highway into a symbol of international friction. Former President Trump criticized Canada's retaliatory threats, framing them as an attack on American sovereignty. He suggests that the U.S. holds all the leverage in this trade relationship. This political posturing makes a diplomatic resolution more difficult. The world is watching to see how this high-stakes standoff will unfold. The consequences for both nations could be significant, affecting businesses and communities on both sides. The fragile nature of international trade agreements is now on full display. The deep economic ties that once bound the two nations are strained by political maneuvering. The prospect of a full-blown trade war has created uncertainty and anxiety. The situation highlights the need for careful negotiation and diplomacy. In response, British Columbia has proposed tolls on commercial trucks traveling to Alaska. This move targets the Alaska Highway, a critical lifeline for the U.S. state. By targeting this route, British Columbia aims to exert economic pressure on the United States. The proposed tolls are part of a broader retaliatory strategy. Premier Eby has indicated other options, like halting provincial purchases of American products. The province is leveraging its geographical position, controlling the primary land route to Alaska. News of potential tolls has caused alarm in Alaska, with concerns about supply chain disruptions. The Alaska Trucking Association warned of higher costs for goods shipped to the state. This would burden Alaskan residents and businesses, highlighting interconnected economies. British Columbia's actions have international implications, with Ottawa's tacit approval. The strategy appears to be a coordinated approach, with provinces applying direct pressure. This shows a new level of resolve from Canada in defending its economic interests. The political dynamics are complex, with British Columbia acting at a provincial level. The Canadian federal government has not officially endorsed the toll plan. The situation underscores the deep economic ties between the two nations. The proposed tolls have turned a remote highway into a symbol of international friction. The focus on Alaska's access route highlights the fragile nature of trade agreements. The situation calls for careful negotiation and diplomacy to avoid further escalation. British Columbia is not alone in its stand against U.S. tariffs. Other Canadian provinces are preparing their own countermeasures, creating a unified front. Leaders in the Yukon support British Columbia's plan, considering their own measures. Ontario may add surcharges to American goods and limit access for U.S. companies. This coordinated response shows the depth of Canadian opposition to American tariffs. The economic consequences are a major worry, especially near the border. In places like Buffalo, New York, businesses fear rising prices and disruptions. The auto manufacturing sector is particularly vulnerable, with cross-border supply chains. Tariffs could cripple this integrated system, affecting industries like brewing and fishing. Local leaders express anxiety about long-term damage to community ties. The political conflict creates uncertainty, threatening the cooperative spirit of border regions. Provincial solidarity sends a powerful signal to Washington. The economic pain would be felt across Canada, with a widespread response. By acting together, provinces increase their leverage, complicating U.S. calculations. The dispute turns into a complex, multi-front economic conflict. The plan to toll the Alaska Highway is a strategic move by British Columbia. The province uses its geography as an economic weapon, targeting a U.S. state. The goal is to make the economic cost of U.S. tariffs clear. Provincial officials insist the project is feasible, despite logistical challenges. Critics argue the plan is more of a political threat than a practical reality. The situation highlights the intertwined nature of the U.S. Canada trade relationship. Regional governments are preparing to protect their economic interests. This assertiveness adds complexity to international relations. The rationale behind the tolls is about leverage, using unique points of influence. The threat of disrupting Alaska's supply chain forces the U.S. to consider consequences. Whether tolls are built is secondary to the power of the threat. It changes the conversation, forcing parties to reconsider positions. The situation calls for careful negotiation and diplomacy to avoid further escalation. Industries along the U.S. Canada border have deeply integrated economies. The auto manufacturing sector is a prime example, with cross-border supply chains. Tariffs would disrupt this process, driving up costs and risking job losses. Other industries, like brewing and fishing, face significant challenges. Tariffs would increase production costs, affecting small businesses. The tourism industry is another major concern, with Canadian visitors supporting local economies. Political tensions have led to a drop in Canadian travel to the U.S. A sustained drop in tourism would severely impact border communities. The threat to integrated economies goes beyond dollars and cents. It threatens a way of life defined by cross-border flow of goods and ideas. The new tariffs threaten to build an economic and psychological wall. This wall could sever connections that have been the foundation of peace and prosperity. American communities sharing a border with Canada are bracing for impact. President Trump's tariff plans have left border towns in high alert. These communities share not just an economy, but also culture and family ties. The prospect of a trade war threatens to unravel these connections. Residents in towns like Point Roberts, Washington, are particularly worried. Tariffs and border restrictions could make daily life difficult and expensive. The fear is that new policies will create barriers where there was once cooperation. Local leaders are scrambling to manage the situation, reaching out to Canadian counterparts. They emphasize that political disputes do not reflect local feelings. There is a growing fear that the damage may be long-lasting. The sense of a shared community is being eroded by the conflict. The tariff dispute has created resentment and anxiety in border communities. Rising prices for essential goods are a constant source of stress. The potential for business closures and job losses leaves many feeling powerless. On the Canadian side, there is a sense of betrayal, fueling a Buy Canadian movement. The political climate strains personal relationships, testing long-standing friendships. U.S. business owners are trying to do damage control, emphasizing local sentiment. There is a fear that efforts may not counter the divisive national narrative. The human cost of this trade war is measured in strained friendships and canceled visits. The sense of a shared community is being eroded by the conflict. Political decisions are reshaping personal connections and regional identity. Despite political rhetoric, some Canadians choose a path of unity. They see visits to places like Alaska as a way to maintain personal connections. Events like the Buckwheat International Ski Classic symbolize cross-border unity. Canadian participation in the ski event sends a powerful message of friendship. Attendees focus on unity, preserving positive relationships with Alaskan neighbors. They express frustration with U.S. policies, but emphasize strong friendships. This citizen diplomacy highlights a grassroots effort to keep community spirit alive. It provides a hopeful counter-narrative, showing people can choose a different path. Personal relationships offer a foundation for future reconciliation and cooperation. These acts of friendship preserve human connections essential for rebuilding relationships. The trade tensions have pushed the U.S. Canada relationship to a crossroads. One path involves continued conflict, with more tariffs and economic pain. The other path requires diplomacy and finding common ground. The choice will have lasting consequences for both economies and their partnership. The situation remains volatile, with no clear resolution in sight. Bridging the philosophical divide requires compromise and recognition of mutual benefits. Border communities call for a swift and peaceful resolution, understanding the stakes. Their pleas contrast with aggressive national rhetoric, reminding of the trade relationship's reality. The question is whether deep ties can withstand the political storm. Can citizen diplomacy inspire cooperation among leaders, or will nationalism build a wall?